Have you ever felt like something inside you was trying to come out, but you didn't know where to begin? Like your throat was full, but empty at the same time. Like your mind was crowded with thoughts, yet none of them seemed worthy of being spoken out loud. You're not alone. And more importantly, this doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It only means that somewhere along your story, you learned that you couldn't. The block that silences you isn't a lack of ideas, it's fear. Fear of being misunderstood, rejected, ridiculed, fear of revealing parts of yourself that were buried so long ago, they now feel unfamiliar, even to you. But those parts are still alive. They're just hidden beneath layers of emotional censorship, unprocessed pain, and habits that taught you to withhold more than express. It's not that your voice is gone, it's that it was smothered before it ever learned how to rise. And the cruelest part is that you started to believe silence was just your personality. Since childhood, we were programmed to obey more than to feel, to repeat more than to reflect, to fit in more than to confront. As Bruce Lipton explains, the first 7 years of your life are like a hypnotic recording. What you heard, felt, and experienced during that phase shaped not just what you think, but what you believe is safe to express. It's as if your true self was silenced in the crib before it even had a chance to make a sound. There's a reason your words get stuck right at the edge of your lips, a reason your chest tightens just before you speak. And it's not because you're socially awkward. It's not because you don't have anything to say. It's because something inside you doesn't recognize the voice that the world expects you to use. When your inner world is vibrating at one frequency and your outer persona is forced to echo, another silence becomes your safest option. Not because you're weak, but because you're trying to survive the dissonance. It's like living in two different rooms at once, one where your truth exists in raw, unfiltered clarity, and another where you're expected to speak from performance polish and pretense. That gap is exhausting, overthinking. Contrary to what most believe, isn't a flaw in your logic. It's a symptom of nervous system distress. It's what happens when your body senses a threat not physical, but existential. The threat of not being accepted for who you really are. The threat of being too much or not enough. So your system compensates. It analyzes. It censors. It delays. Until there's no room left for flow, only hesitation, only doubt. And here's what most people don't understand. The silence you carry isn't passive. It's protective. It's a mask worn so long, you started thinking it was your face. You learned to speak only in frequencies that didn't disturb the surface. But deep inside your real voice, the one you've buried is vibrating in a different key entirely. That's what creates the dissonance. That's what drains you. Your truth and your words are not in the same room. So, how do you restore resonance? You start by listening to the body, not the voice you practiced in the mirror, not the version you rehearsed before every meeting, every date, every difficult conversation, but the voice that lives in your chest when no one's watching, the one that cracks when it tells the truth, the one that doesn't try to sound wise, just real. The habit here is not to force coherence, but to return to it, breath by breath, word by word, moment by moment. There's a stillness beneath your performance, and within that stillness, there is alignment, a place where what you feel and what you say come from the same source. When you speak from there, you don't run out of things to say, because you're not thinking, you're resonating, you're not impressing, you're transmitting, and your voice finally begins to feel like your own. We've been taught to believe that speaking is an intellectual act, that words are born in the brain shaped by thought, then released into sound. But that's not how it really works. Not when you're speaking from truth, not when you're aligned. Because when you're aligned, words don't come from the mind. They come from somewhere deeper, somewhere older, somewhere quieter. Your voice in its purest form isn't just communication, it's transmission. It carries not only meaning, but frequency, intention, coherence. That's why some people can say very little and move you to tears, while others say so much and leave you untouched. It's not the content, it's the vibration behind the content. And that vibration doesn't come from intellectual effort, it comes from inner harmony. Gregg Braden speaks of the electromagnetic field of the heart, how it radiates far beyond the brain, carrying a signal that is felt more than heard. When your heart, mind, and body are in alignment, you enter a field of coherence, and from that field speech flows effortlessly, clearly, authentically, not as performance, not as defense, but as presence. That's why, in those rare moments when you feel deeply connected with yourself, with someone you trust, with a purpose that lights you up, words come without thinking. You don't prepare, you don't analyze, you simply allow. The mind doesn't construct the message, the field delivers it. It may sound abstract, but you've felt it before. In a late night conversation that turned into truth, in a moment of vulnerability when your voice trembled but didn't hold back, in the quiet certainty of saying exactly what needed to be said, without knowing beforehand what that would be. That's not intellect, that's resonance, that's field. And the habit that unlocks this kind of expression is not more thinking, it's more alignment, it's coherence, not content. Breathwork, heart connection, grounding. They're not just wellness tools, they're doorways to authentic speech. Because when you speak from alignment, your voice doesn't search for approval. It simply lands. It carries weight. It reaches places. Logic can't. You don't need to become smarter to speak with impact. You need to become more attuned to yourself, to the moment, to the quiet wisdom that lives beneath the noise. That's where your words come from. That's where your voice begins. There's a hidden force behind your silence, and it's not just fear, it's control. A quiet, desperate need to sound right, to look composed, to avoid judgment at all costs. And this control, though it seems like protection, is the very thing that blocks your voice. The more you try to speak perfectly, the further you move from speaking truthfully. Inside your mind, there's a loop, a rehearsed script of how you think you should sound. It plays in the background of every interaction. Say this, don't say that. Be clear, be smart. Don't mess up. And every time you try to follow that loop, you disconnect. From the moment, from yourself, from your body, until your voice isn't a reflection of you anymore. It's a performance, and performances are exhausting. The irony is brutal. The more you control what to say, the less you access what matters. You become articulate and empty, polished and disconnected, safe but invisible. And the worst part, you begin to mistake this controlled version of you for who you really are. But deep inside, there's a part of you that's raw, messy, unscripted. It stumbles over words. It says things awkwardly, but it's real. And it's that part that people crave because people don't connect with perfection. They connect with presence. They connect with courage. They connect with the voice that dares to show up even if it shakes. The habit that began to change everything for me was painfully simple. I gave myself 3 minutes a day to speak without preparation. No editing, no performance, just voice, just breath, just letting whatever wanted to come out come out. It wasn't eloquent, it wasn't smart, but it was mine. And that daily messy monologue began to rewire something deeper than confidence. It rebuilt presence, and with presence came liberation. You don't need more control to speak better. You need less. You need to feel safe enough to be seen. Even when you don't sound perfect, you need to trust that what you're trying to say matters more than how you say it. That's how your voice returns. Not as performance, but as presence. Not as a perfect script, but as a living truth. Behind every silent mouth is a wounded story. A time you spoke and weren't heard. A moment you showed yourself and felt shame. A memory of being too loud, too weird, too emotional, and learning quickly that silence hurt less. That invisibility felt safer than rejection. And so you shrank, your voice shrank, not out of weakness, out of protection. Bruce Lipton speaks of cellular memory, how trauma isn't just stored in your mind, but in your body, your cells, your breath, your voice too. Every time you felt ignored or dismissed, that memory didn't just vanish. It etched itself into your throat, into your posture, into your tone. And slowly speaking became less about expression and more about survival. But there's something else happening too. Every time you silence yourself, even unconsciously, your self-worth takes a hit. It's not just that you aren't speaking, it's that you're sending a message to your nervous system that your truth doesn't matter, that your presence doesn't count, that your voice doesn't deserve the space it takes up. And that message over time becomes identity. Reclaiming your voice is not just about communication, it's about healing. It's about telling your nervous system a new story, one where expression is safe, where being heard is possible, where you don't have to perform to be worthy, you only have to exist. A student of mine once healed chronic shyness through a practice so simple, it seemed irrelevant, writing letters she would never send. Every day she gave her truth a place to land, and slowly the silence inside her began to breathe again. Her voice, which had once been small and shaky, became firm, clear, unapologetic. Not because she was trying to sound confident, but because she finally believed she deserved to be heard. That's what rewires self-worth, not affirmation, not external validation, but the simple repeated act of letting your voice exist without judgment. Voice print journaling, voice notes to yourself, whispered truths in the dark. They may seem small, but they carry weight. They tell your nervous system, I am here, I matter, I can speak without shame. And that is how the voice returns, one breath, one word, one moment of truth at a time. Your voice is not just sound. It is not just air pushed through vocal cords. It is a spiritual imprint, a vibrational signature that carries the essence of who you are in each syllable. And whether you're aware of it or not, every word you speak is either reinforcing your alignment or scattering it. Most people believe that manifestation is silent, that if they think hard enough, wish deeply enough, the world will shift. But manifestation doesn't end in silence. It completes itself in speech. Because the moment you speak from truth, you're not just describing reality, you're creating it. You're imprinting the field with your frequency. And if your voice is distorted by shame, fear, or hesitation, your manifestations will echo that distortion. That's why so many desires contradict themselves. You want clarity, but you speak confusion. You want love, but you speak self-betrayal. You want freedom, but your voice sounds like a cage. Because your voice is not just expression, it's alignment. It reveals whether you're speaking from who you are or from who you've been pretending to be. Neville Goddard spoke of a principle. Speak not from the reality you see, but from the reality you are becoming. Not to fake it, but to shift your frequency into coherence with what you want to create. Because when your voice aligns with your future, that future begins to arrive. This isn't just spiritual, it's neurological. When you narrate your reality with truth, with clarity, with conviction, you are retraining your brain to embody a new identity. You are restoring the connection between inner belief and outer sound. That's why intentional speech, especially in the quiet of the morning, before the noise of the world arrives, becomes a ritual, a reset, a vibrational realignment, before life tries to pull you back into the old pattern. Speaking with intention is not about being loud, it's about being clean. Clear, honest, in tune with your truth. It is the habit of spiritual coherence, where your words are not decoration but declaration, where every sentence becomes a subtle act of becoming, and that more than any technique is what brings your voice back to life. By now, maybe something inside you has softened or awakened or both, and maybe you're beginning to feel the truth of it all, that your voice was never missing, it was waiting. Not for a stage, not for approval, but for alignment, for permission, for coherence between who you are and what you allow yourself to express. Bruce Lipton reminds us, your biology listens to your speech. Every word you say doesn't just affect others, it reprograms you. It changes your chemistry. It speaks directly to your cells. Just like affirmations can shape beliefs, your daily voice shapes your emotional landscape. And if your speech has been filled with apology, hesitation, or absence, your body feels that, your identity feels that. But the opposite is also true. When you begin to speak with alignment, with presence, with honesty, with breath, your body remembers. It feels safe again. It softens. It grounds. Because your words are not just sounds. They are frequency codes. They carry intention, direction power. They tell your nervous system what is real. They anchor your identity in the present moment, Neville Goddard said. Your word is imagination, materialized in sound. And when you really let that land, You realize speaking is not a social task, it is a creative act, a spiritual act, a reclamation. Every time you speak from truth, you're becoming not just heard, but known, not just understood, but integrated. So maybe the question was never, what should I say? Maybe it was always, what part of me am I finally ready to stop silencing? Because you never lacked what to say. You lacked permission to be. And now the silence you once feared becomes sacred, a space to listen, a space to return, a space to begin again. A mute radio doesn't mean silence, it means misalignment. And today you've taken one step closer to tuning back in, to finding the frequency where your voice, your truth, your presence meet. Speaking is not performance, it is self-acceptance, vibrating out loud. And that sound, your sound, is the beginning of everything.